I'm doing it like closed, open, right? It's not a continuous line. And even this one, you see this place is very much open, here a little bit open. That's good for chi movement. We always talk about the chi movement. It's good for not everything choked, but something you can see the air can go inside. So when I'm doing this, it's something like a line technique. So for line technique, sometimes if we do a line like this and this, that means this angle, there is this structure can move inside of this place. So this is not just this, but we can do it like this, right? So it's something like a line technique. So somehow there are no textbook about how to do it. It needs lots of experience to feel which one you can feel more about the value of the line. So this is the trunk. So of course, when we do the tree, we do the bigger trunk and the bottom, and the top part a little more smaller. So this is a regulation. So when we do the top part, it's smaller. And not everything connected. It could be open a little bit. So it's kind of like a chi movement. So I call chi movement. So that's good. That's good. And okay. So this also could do some trunk. So basically, you can feel like the more darker, bigger, it's more front. So they feel like that. So because this is a demonstration, not everything very much good organized. So, but you already can feel that my line getting some lighter color. It's no more so dark because my water creates the function. So you can see that the line getting lighter color, and that's because this line or more further and the background. So now my line go to the small branches. So my line getting smaller and smaller, right? Yeah, so smaller and smaller. Like I said that when I was very young, I watched my grandpa painting. He never washed his brush. That's because he organized so well. So when he can keep on drawing, and in the end, the brush is almost clean. So no more, do not need to wash the ink out. So you see that I get it dry. See, my brush is dry. I didn't change anything, right? So now I can work on the scratching on the trunk to create the texture. So, okay, so I did a tree trunk and the branch. And you can see that from dark and the big and the white line to smaller and the lighter and the dry and the scratch for the texture. So this is one time I use my ink from my brush. This is good, right? So I do another brush, another trunk. I do this again, but I can control the brush a little more, less ink, because I will do a smaller tree in front of that. So I don't have to get too much ink. So get a small tree. Okay. Yeah, I don't do so much ink. And if I feel like my ink is still too much, I want to dry, I can scratch on my paper. Okay. And I can do, oh, I want some dry color. So scratch. Okay, so this is the second tree. And then I want to do another tree over here. So this one, I would have the whole tree a little lighter than this one. So my ink brush, I'm adding some water on this to work. So I'm no more adding the fresh black ink. I just use this ink to the whole tree for this place. So, okay, so I'll work on this. So I'm starting from most further part. Yeah, although I'm doing this, when it's totally dry, you will see that this is lighter than this. So this is important. When it's wet, you feel it's similar, right? So when it's totally dry, you will feel the different. Yeah, basically the landscape painting, you have to make your line look so jiggling, like old man's texture. You need to feel like your old man. Yeah, it's just like a taste for traditional painting. Yeah, we like the old man's feeling, and feel like knowledgeable and somehow like yeah. And you can feel the darkness getting very light here, right? So okay, I get it. Texture for the trunk, right? And getting more lighter and more lighter. Yeah, of course, if I draw slower, also can create something looks very more clear lines. Even my color is pretty light, but I can control the drawing speed to make it looks like still pretty clear, because I draw the line a little slower. Although it's lighter, but the line could be a little bigger. Yeah, that's okay. But actually it's lighter. So this tree and this tree, of course, this is darker, this is lighter. So this is the front, this is the behind. It's pretty clear, right? So this is why we can do everything organized based on the plan for our work. So also I can do a little more dry. Sorry, I need to stop here so that this line is still in front of it, right? It's a little mistake. So we can do a more dry and a more further backside tree. I do very dry. It's harder for me to work, but this is very much subtlety. You can, when it's dried, you can feel the depths inside of the picture so much abundant, so much rich detail. Okay, so this is about the truck Okay, so now I'm working on the leaf. So typically we do a leaf for the pine tree. So lots of landscape painting, it is come up with the pine tree painting. So we do the pine tree leaf, could be pretty dark. I do it pretty dark, and same like the trunk, but the line needed to be much more smaller. And also, when we draw the pine tree, we need a leaf. We needed to do it not just a pattern, but it's more like writing. To write it, we needed to somehow like calculate the leaf. Okay, so a little bit look, you will feel like a little bit headache to calculate, right? So how about that? So let me see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. How about we just do 8? Okay, 8 leaves. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's another leaf, right? So when we do this pattern and that pattern, don't totally overlapping, but could connecting a little bit. So the line could connecting, but not totally the same place, put it again. So, and also the line needed to look like calligraphy writing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you see that each line, they have a little bit feeling like this, like writing, right? So even a very small detail, you needed to keep this so that it could create a good quality of the work. So basically, Chinese painting needed to draw pretty slow. It's like attitude, very enjoyable and slow to work. Okay, don't work that too much fast. So you have to very enjoyable to work. So, okay, so I do that. Somehow I demonstration work a little faster than the actual usual situation because I needed to complete it within a time frame. So I'm drawing a little faster to complete it. But actually, when you do the assignment, you can slower. So like remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and when we're doing this leaf drawing, we needed to compose it, get a very natural outline, and sometimes more density and sometimes more loose. So you need to create kind of the rhythm inside the work. It's a little bit difficult for beginners because there's no standard what is a rhythm, right? And you have to feel, for example, I want this part much more further behind, so the leaf will be a little bit smaller and there won't be too much density to work. So I will do a little bit loose looking. Some leaf are really small, right? But of course, if you observe the real pine trees, there are no leaf just like this. But in the system of Chinese painting, this is really a good feeling, like it's a further, very loose, some leaves there, right? So it's another kind of understanding of the nature. Right, so yeah, basically here I do very little leaf, not so much leaf. So this is a typical pine tree leaf painting. Yeah, pine tree leaf painting. And you notice that I keep on working. I'm not changing my brush or adding the ink. you know what? Because I needed to create the different darkness from the ink. So I needed to follow with the reduce of the darkness inside of my brush. So you see, I adding more leaf here now, but actually now you look so similar color, but when it's dry, it will be different. You can feel the subtlety between them. So I'm not correcting the previous done work, but I'm adding the layer like a lighter layer, right? So you feel like it's more leaf I'm adding, but actually they are lighter. Actually they are lighter. So you can see that if I put in the light color beside this very dark color, it creates different layers. But of course, I needed to work slower. Yeah, so if it's slower, will be better. So I almost complete this one. And now I'm working the leaf on this tree, right? So this tree needs a lighter, and my brush ink is way lighter now. So it's good for me to do lighter. Yeah, although on the camera, maybe not so clear, but the actual situation, this is light. And I need to make this kind of leaf a little bit smaller than this. You'll feel it's because it's a little bit more tilt and it's more skinnier looking. It's good to feel like this is a side from this one. So if this is in the center, this is more like a side. So the shape could be a little bit changed. So yeah, although if you observe the tree itself, it's not really appear like this. But if you do the painting, you need to create a system inside of your work. And you needed to understand, oh, this feel like a side, this is more front. So the color change. So basically we observe this from the nature, but actually we needed to recreate our nature, reorganize our nature. And that makes nature looks realistic. Yeah, so although lots of people don't understand what's the realistic art, they consider, oh, you do realistic art just means you are a copy from the nature. Actually, that's not true. Even if we do figure drawing, and you probably notice that it's not just something you copy from the photo or copy from the model. You have to understand the regulation and reorganize and then create a new thing instead of the original image. And then it will give you the feeling like it just look like the object. It's just look like an object does not mean it is exactly from the object. So it's like something like a creative progress. Yeah, but of course, for people did not have this training, they cannot understand why. So okay, so I did the pine tree leaf, right? I did the pine tree leaf, and then I do another kind of leaf for this little tree. Okay, so I do the ink again. I want to have a little bigger line for this ink. I add a little bit of water. And then I do this kind of leaf is different, and somehow it look like chrysanthemum. We learned the chrysanthemum painting, right? So it's more like a chrysanthemum. So like writing like this way, right? So we can do like a how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How about 6? So we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So this is a regulation to do this leaf. Yeah, although it looks like an abstract pattern, but you have to use the line like calligraphy, like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's really like writing. So needed to feel this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So this is the way to write this kind of. Yeah, you can say it's a painting, but actually it's like writing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can feel the different darkness and the different density for the leaf. Although it's just creates the gray color, but the texture of the writing is so important for this work. And a good skilled painter also can create the color feeling, the darkness of the leaf, and even the weather. For example, under a certain weather, how the clearance of the line and the leaf, sometimes it looks very foggy, and sometimes you can feel like inside the cloud, and sometimes it looks very wet, sometimes it looks very dry. Even sometimes you can feel the line very, very unclear. Yeah, it's like a weather feeling, like under the wind, and all of the leaf will go to a certain direction, and you can feel the wind because of the writing for details. That's very interesting. And only when you take a look of lots of these good paintings, you can understand how much artist can work within a piece of work. So it looks like a pretty abstract elements. Looks like most of the landscape paintings, it looks so similar, but if you look into details, you will enjoy these details and you will understand them more. Right? Okay, so I kind of like completed these trees, right? And also sometimes we can add in some dots for the tree because we needed to make the tree look so old. So these dots helps to create something like lots of moisture, little details on the tree. It also creates the detail feeling for the tree. That's some way. Also, another way to make the tree, like I said, when I do in demonstration, I separate the tree with a rock. So kind of like you feel like I'm working on the tree only. But the real situation when we do the rock and the tree, and then some progress, we work together. So, but now I make them separately because so that it's easier for you to see how did I do the tree. So also we could do a little bit very gray color to color the tree. For example, I want the trunk a little darker. I use very gray. You see, even cannot see it. It's just like water. The blend with a little bit of gray color. So that also creates the color feeling. And also it works with the leaf. So for example, I wanted this leaf and much more entirely combined together. I add some gray color, right? Yeah, but I'm not painting on it. Although I'm making it like a gray, but you still could consider I'm adding the dots like a calligraphy. It's not really like a painting evenly off and flat. It's more like a dots and a very natural way. Yeah, the standard for painting and calligraphy are same. And you needed to make it look like it's so natural. Not so much in purposely to paint on a certain area, but it's more like naturally feel like it just happened to adding the dot over there. So that's the standard for landscape painting. All right, so now I complete the tree demonstration. Now I'm going to do some rock. Rock is mostly considered more difficult for most of the people because it's way more difficult to work because it's so abstract. And somehow, like if you take a look at people's rock painting, you can, for me, it's very obviously, I can see if the people get trained or not because it's so much. Although the final of the work, lots of people today, they don't have this kind of training. They just do the rock like a drawing, and they can create the rock look like a rock. However, it's not so natural. So it's more difficult. So like when we do the rock, we needed to make the color a little gray color inside of brush and create the dark color first. Same like a tree drawing. I did most of the dark over here, and then you can see the lighter and lighter, right? So rock is the same, and we needed to make the most dark part at the very beginning so that we can see that there's a different darkness for the rock. So it depends on the need for spatial relation. So I did this line. Probably you know that, feel like when I do the tree, I did it like this, right? But it's instead of this, right? When we do rock, it's needed much more rough. I say, of course, rock is more rough than the tree, it's more solid. So sometimes even the line is not this way, but it's more like against a brush direction. It's going like this way, going up, right? So sometimes it's not writing this way, but the side and against the blade. It's not so much healthy for our brush. However, it's healthy for the work. So we have to make the work a little bit more follow the need for the work instead of the brush. So I'm doing it. So mostly we do the rock starting from outline, and also when we do the outline, make sure not everything very close, very totally close. We need something open. So although I'm doing this rock here, you see, actually I opened here because it's so dry line, right? So I opened here and I opened here, right? So when I continue with this one, I doing like here, instead of continue this way, I doing this line and a little bit open here, not totally close, right? So see, this is the way to outline. So how much to do depends on the ink. So like I feel my ink can work more. So I can work over here. So then I can work inside the scratching for lighter color. But I will not work on there anymore because I feel like my ink is almost finishing. So that it's getting dry. When it's too dry, I can add a little bit of water. But I usually do not add in the ink. I just add in some water. So I can keep the consequence of the darkness for my work. So I keep on drawing. And you see that I'm scratching. When introducing Ma Yuan, I said that he used the ox chopping, right? So, but now I'm not using ox chopping. I'm doing this, we call pi ma cun. It's more like a lines, dry lines. Very dry lines. You see my brush almost damaged, right? So that's because I need this very rough and dry lines. Okay, so I did a rock. You see from very dark to gray and the more light and the more dry, all of them within one time of the ink, right? So this is good. So then I adding dots. Usually for landscape painting, we always adding dots for the rock. And that's because especially in Chinese landscape situation, there are lots of humid, they're wet, and there are lots of plants, flowers, weeds, just against or inside of the rock, so that it's good to feel the rock. But when we do the dots, don't do the dots like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, not like that. So we have to do the dots very naturally. How naturally? You need to feel like it's writing. And you feel like writing, and this line stroke need to say hello to others. So say hello to this one. So they say hello to each others. So this is the way to do the dots. So they don't have to be regularly like the same form of the shape, but they need to look very much natural. And sometimes it's just on the beside the truck. So adding more by the truck. And also when we do dots, don't do the same darkness. Sometimes the side, the further we need a lighter, the front a little more darker, more black. So this is a good way to create a natural feeling landscape rock. Okay, so this is a rock. I did that. So I will practice another one. I will do this side, do a rock over here. So basically, this is behind this, right? So I will make a little bit of water and not adding any ink. Just use this gray color to work. So I'll add gray color, The good thing is I do this, although it looks so wet, it's lighter than this line. So that's because it is behind this line. And you remember that I said when we do the line, we need to run the line sometimes against the hair direction. So it's not healthy for the brush, but you can prepare some of this brush, a thick brush, whether they are good for the landscape painting. So this part, and adding little dots over here again. Okay. Now I'm working this part. I will do a rock. So basically, it's like a practice again, so that you can familiar with this progress. So this part is a little bit bigger and lighter than this. Could similar like this, a bit lighter than this. Make sure that. So Yeah, so you feel like actually when we do landscape painting, it looks more freedom, right? The shape is so natural, but it needs a lot of practice to get it experience. So somehow the landscape painting is the most difficult to handle. It needs a lot of educated skill. We call 修养. So yeah, usually if you're not so good in the tradition, it's very hard to do the landscape painting. So okay, I did a rock over here, and it's clearly that it's behind this, right? So I was going to do a rock over here, and then it could be a little bit darker than this. Oh, it's the regulation for the Chinese painting space is like a dark and the light, then it could be dark again, because our brain will tell us this, although it's darker than this, but it is behind this. So that's also could work. So could adding in a little bit ink, like adding too much ink over here. So little, but of course it will not darker than this. That's still important. But it's important to keep your brush with a certain dry. Don't too much wet. And sometimes when it's too wet, it's very easy to get it too dark. So dry. I did it too dry too fast. So I adding a little bit ink, a little bit of water. So basically my jar is not to clean my brush, but it's more about adding some water into my ink. So this is a good habit. So my jar will not, water jar will not get dirty very fast, right? So, okay. So this is another mountain, and I adding some dots for the details for the mountain. You probably notice that even adding dots, sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's light, sometimes it's dry. So you needed to switch that very often so that your work will look natural. Okay, then I could adding something usually like between the rock. Sometimes we're adding the line like this. That means there's a road, or like steps or road between. That's good. So, and sometimes when we do some line like this, also could stand for some muddy and even the water, or like water, like a reflection of the rock against the water for the land. So sometimes we get to creating thinking and painting, not just like everything, because we're not doing it from the photo. So we have to feel, to develop that details based on. I want to talk about this water. Okay, so how about we do a bank, water bank, and then we can do some little plants by the bank and the dots, so can feel this part. It's more like a water, right? So okay, how about we do a line to separate the land with the water. So here's the water, here's the land. So this is the rock. How about we do a rock again? Because basically the rock is the most difficult to do. So the good thing is I make the camera very low so that we can see this progress clearly this time. So I would So because I'm doing another portion for the rock, although this rock should be most dark over this area, but for the whole picture, I'm finding another focusing point over here. So it could be pretty dark. Don't have to be really lighter than that one. So I'm doing a little bit darker one. So I'm doing a darker one. Again, that's okay because it's a really different relation. So I try to demonstrate. This is not good. If this line and this line joined in the same spot, they're really like the not so much spatial rest. So I need to go this way to avoid to join to one. So yeah, although it looks like a very natural progress, but sometimes you need to understand the spatial relation each other to do the work. So when my brush is getting dry very fast, depends on the rice paper. So like the paper I selected today, it does absorb the ink so quick. So I have to add some water. Okay, and the bad thing is when it absorbs the water very quick, each time I cannot work out too much. So I have to just finish this part over here. So I just finish this part over here, and I'm adding the dots for the plant. So you see this dots for the tree. Oh. The tree. Okay, so kind of like I finish this one, so then I plan to do another rock over here. So will be lighter, a little bit lighter. So I'm not adding any ink, just adding some water into my dish, this part, so that we can continue to work the details. Yeah, so see that line when it's opened, like here open, not totally close, hit to another line, that's good. That means you can see, you can feel the chi movement. And when you have line solid and this line much more softer, this is good. And that means you can see the different spatial relation each other. Adding the more again. This paper very much control water. So the good thing is it's easy to create, it's very dry, like old man style. The bad thing is I cannot work too much, I only work this part to finish, and I have to get in ink again to work the rest. And I can add in the dots for the plant. And sometimes it's good to have some, when ink is still wet, adding the dots, it's easy to smell and blind them together. But depends, sometimes too wet is not good. Like this dot is not good, too wet. So depends. Okay, so I will do a mountain over here so that can, oh, I didn't notice the spring. I can see the mountain I just did. I will do a mountain over here so that I can join this one, and this one. So, but this one will be lighter than this one. So I need to blend some ink. I added some ink. The camera is slow. So add some ink, gray, not so dark, but I need more wet. I want to work more area. So yeah, notice that I do the painting the rock. My brush is side brush to work. And sometimes adding a little bit using the tip to work. And then you can see that it still can combine the together. And you see, get it dry again. Add it a little bit more. And continue this rock over here. Yeah, it's not healthy for the brush. But you see that it's really good for the work. It's so dry, and I just feel like scratching, right? Yeah, scratching. And now I adding the dots for my plant, my mountain. Okay. So, I would do more mountain over here, this area. So, same thing like this. The same thing like this. I would prepare some again. Yeah, so I do this demonstration progress again and again, so that it's helpful for you to understand how to do the mountain. It's kind of like more freedom. It's also a little bit of a challenge. You need to have some skill of this to work it out. So these are some very typical landscape skill. And also sometimes you can find that on your sample work, there's some house or buildings you have to do. In this case, one is you need to control the darkness of it. I'm doing it very light, gray color. Yeah, and usually for example, if I want to do a house over here, so we have to do the line a little bit skinnier and make sure your line more like a writing. You see that each stroke very clear. Okay, it's not the same like a drawing, but it's more like a writing. So it doesn't matter the perspective. Most of situation, Asian art, Chinese art, the traditional art, they do not have the perspective technique. But it's just like a flat image, but they need to feel like there's something interesting, meaningful, and the calligraphy related. So if I do more here, yeah, and do not correct. If you feel like, oh, I don't want this one, I want to correct. Sorry, you cannot correct it at all. You have to keep it. Even if it's wrong, you have to keep it. Okay, and then sometimes you can add in something like a little rock, and the rock have to be like that. And sometimes we do some tree like this way. In some works, you can see the tree behind the house. It's just like dots for the tree. That's the usual situation. But make sure sometimes it's very light because it's mostly this kind of tree technique. It's for some very, very further tree, not for very close by tree. So don't make it too dark. just compared to this front tree leaf, it need to be much softer and much more light, so that it will not like jump out to become the major object. So basically, this very foggy elements. So for example, I can do, for example, if I want to have more tree over here, use this style, I can adding some, just make sure it's light. So I'm adding some water into my ink. So I don't want it to make it too dark. So yeah, it's a light. Yeah, it's a lighter than this. It's good. So draw the trunk first. It don't have to be exactly the same height, but usually the way more further, more lighter, and shorter. Okay, so that's the usual situation. And the front one can be bigger, and then use the dots like this to work. I did it a little bit darker, but when it's dry, it will be okay. When it's wet, it's darker. So dots need to be more natural way, not a regularly pattern, but sometimes it could be look like a cone, like a lower part bigger, the top part skinnier, smaller, like a cone, right? It's look like a pine tree. That's okay. The dots need to be look like a calligraphy way. Sometimes even like say each other high. So this is that. And also when you have a drier, lighter colored ink, you could adding back to against the dark one. So it looks much natural feeling. And also you can do like this way. This is for like a line. You can feel there's a road over here. So also when adding some, sometimes when feel this and this is so similar darkness, it's important to make the front one a little darker. So highlight it. So you still can feel like this is in front of that one. So these are something for most. And when the end of the work, you could add in something. For example, I want to add a little rock over here to combine. Yeah, basically Chinese painting, landscaping, we are creating the image. Not most of the image we do are not from the real photo, because the perspective for this kind of work, it's impossible to take a photo, because it's more like a bird sight, right? It feel like a look down from the sky, and as a traveler, it's impossible. It's really impossible for you to see the scene actually like this, right? So you have to organize the whole picture with a different kind of perspective. So let me go up or lens, so that you can see the most part of the work, right? So the demonstration like this. I will, after class, I will photo the whole image and post on the Brightspace, so that you can see the detail and the whole work to see the relation. But maybe I will adding a little bit over here, adding to connect adjust a little bit the whole picture, and I will put a writing, put a calligraphy on the side of the work, so that means the work itself is completed. And also you could use this work as a sample to do your assignment. Okay.